You know, they say variety is the spice of life. And I guess I agree with that, although I'd probably add garlic powder to that too. Want some variety? Check out D4 Sports. This guy's been working real hard on YouTube the last couple of months. I consider him a friend of mine. I met him in Atlanta back in March. He is a Texas Longhorns fan, but other than that, he seems like a decent human being. But in all seriousness, he's been working real hard on his YouTube channel, and he deserves our support. So you guys check him out, D4 Sports. I'm going to leave a link to his video in the description of this video and the pinned comment. Just click the link. It'll take you to his channel. Check it out. I hope you like what you'll see. If you do, go ahead and subscribe to his channel and tell him Uncle Lou said good morning. Now, everybody knows if you take a hot dog, fry it, and put it on a stick, that's a corn dog. Well, if you take a piece of hot, mushed doo-doo and put it on a stick, that's a corn dog too. At least it was last season. LSU was absolutely terrible. Now, they were not nearly as bad as their record indicated. You know, we knew last season was going to be strange because of the pandemic. You had no spring practices, basically no off-season or summer conditioning or workouts. Fall camp was hit or miss and going on differently at different times in different places. You had opt-outs because of the pandemic, and LSU and maybe Penn State were the two teams I think that that affected the most, at least in terms of their overall record. LSU's a very talented team. They're not nearly as bad as what their record indicated last year, but they were pretty bad. I mean, they got some bad losses, a decent win or two. But in today's video, we're going to take a look at LSU's 2021 college football schedule and try to figure out how much better they can be. Let's go. Hey, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou. I'm live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. Yeah, today we're going to talk about the Corn Dogs, the LSU Tigers. We're going to look at both last year's schedule and this year's schedule. We're not going to spend much time on last year's schedule because there's no point in comparing last year's schedules to this year's because they're just so completely different. LSU, of course, is in the SEC. They played a 10-game conference schedule and no non-con games. This year, back to normal scheduling, which for the SEC is 8 conference games and 4 non-con games. LSU will play all 6 opponents from the West and then 2 opponents from the East. But just briefly, let's put up the 2020 schedule just so we can sort of wrap it up and move on from there. But of course, they went 5-5, right? A sort of weird loss in week 1 that not a lot of people saw coming to Mississippi State. Mississippi State threw for 1,000,000 yards, and people were, oh my God, Mike Leach, the air raid offense, take over to SEC. Well, it turns out Mississippi State wasn't very good, and LSU was even worse. They did win the following week at Vandy, but everyone beat Vandy. A loss to Mizzou, a win over South Carolina, a loss to Auburn, a win against Arkansas, barely 27-24, a loss to Texas A&M, a loss to Alabama, a win at Florida somehow. How'd that happen? I don't know. Oh, yeah. Shout out to the shoe thrower over there for Florida. And then you beat Ole Miss at the end of the year, too. So your 2 best wins, in my opinion, came at the end of the year. The way your season had played out, I don't think very many people were picking LSU to beat Florida or Ole Miss at the end of the season, but they did. So they sort of started to figure things out and turn it around at the end of the year, made several quarterback changes last year. We'll see how that works out for them this year. But there you go. That's a brief look at their schedule from last year. Again, no point in comparing it to next year's schedule. There was no non-con games here, and they played 10 conference games. This year only playing 8. But there you go. Let's look at the 2021 schedule and see what they got to do to get back into contention for at least a division or SEC title or something like that. All right, here it is. And every time I look at these 2021 schedules, I realize what a relief it is to look down and see a normal, quote-unquote normal college football schedule, right, with some non-con games. And LSU starts things out on the road, trip way out to the West Coast, take on a Pac-12 team at UCLA. UCLA is an interesting team. I mean, Chip Kelly's been there for a few years now, hasn't seemed to really be working out for him there, at least not compared to his time at Oregon. We'll see. I've talked to some Pac-12 people who have some expectations for UCLA coming into this year. I think Chip Kelly and Scott Frost in a similar position, really. Scott Frost, of course, in Nebraska. It's kind of time for them to start winning some games and sort of poop or get off the pot here. Can this be a win for Chip Kelly? I don't know. I really don't know. I do think LSU is a better team than UCLA. I mean, this isn't a prediction video. I do prediction videos later in the offseason. I start those in June, so they're about a month away. I'll go through 50 or 60 teams and give you a win-loss record. I'll tell you which games they win and which games they lose. I don't think this is a guaranteed win for LSU, although right now, if I would assume LSU would be a favorite in this game, but still an interesting game, an opponent you're not familiar with, a long way to travel to a place you're not familiar with, all the way out on the West Coast. Chip Kelly's going to want to get this win against an SEC team. This is an interesting game to me. Maybe not the most interesting week one matchup. Of course, you got games like Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, and Miami. But this is up there. I mean, this is one that I think most people will be watching. You follow that one up with another non-con game when you host McNeese, a game you'll be a big favorite in. Same thing again the following week when you host Central Michigan. And then you have your first conference game of the season on the road at Mississippi State. This is an important statement game, in my opinion, for LSU. This is really what started LSU out on the downward spiral that was the 2020 season. I know there was no offseason and LSU had coaching changes and a new quarterback and all that. I get that. Mississippi State had a brand new coaching staff and no offseason to implement the offense. And they came out and absolutely, I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen somebody go up and down the field on an LSU defense like that. That was worse than anything we've seen Alabama even do to LSU really over the last 10 years. And Alabama's had some great offenses, but watching what Mississippi State did to LSU last year in week one was eye-opening for a lot of people, including me. LSU will have revenge on their mind this year. They got to travel to Mississippi State, Starkville, more cowbell. I don't know. Is there enough cowbell for Mississippi State to beat LSU 2 years in a row? We'll find out. The following week, you come back home, you host the Auburn Tigers. They're breaking in a brand new coaching staff this year too, the guys from Boise State. Then you go on the road for an Eastern opponent at Kentucky. Kentucky's a team that has some expectations this year, at least from the fans I've heard from this offseason. Now, I happen to think Kentucky is still, at best, the third or fourth best team in the SEC East. You play them there, though. This is a game you think LSU should win, will be a favorite in, that kind of thing. We'll see. Road game, and weird things happen. I don't know. Come back home, Florida. Now, this is sort of the opposite of the Mississippi State game. LSU is going to want revenge for that Mississippi State game. Florida's going to want revenge for this game. You play you play Florida every single year. They're your yearly opponent from the East. You get them at home this year. Florida replacing their entire offense, including quarterback Kyle Trask and tight end Kyle Pitts, a couple of the wide receivers. I don't have very high expectations for Florida this year at least in terms of how they were the last couple of years. They've been top 10, top 15 team 3 years in a row now. Not sure they're that this year, having to replace that entire offense. A game that is at least in the winnable category for LSU. These games are known to be good games. Anything can happen. Florida's not a pushover by any means, not a terrible team by any means, but I think LSU will be better this year than they were last year. I think Florida will be a little worse this year than they were last year, so you would think that favors LSU here. Then you go on the road and play Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Again, I think this could be an interesting game. Ole Miss is an interesting team to me this year. Do I think they're a top 10 team or are going to win the West? No, I don't. But I do think that offense is going to be good enough for them to beat a team or two that maybe they shouldn't be beating, whether that's Alabama or Texas A&M or LSU or whoever it is anyone's guess at this point. But Ole Miss is not a team you can just look past, in my opinion. That leads you into your bye week. Come out of that and get your annual game against Alabama. This time you got to go play them there. I know they're replacing a lot on offense too, but we got to keep in mind this is Alabama. They've had how many number one recruiting classes in the last 12 years? 10, I believe. 10 or 11 out of the last 12. They've had the number one recruiting class. Bryce Young at quarterback, so a new starter there, but he's got all the talent in the world, looked good in the spring. They lost Najee Harris, but they got 2 or 3 future NFL running backs. Their offensive line will be great. Lost some wide receivers, but again, check the recruiting. And I do think Alabama's defense is in an upward trajectory. It was pretty bad, honestly, a couple of seasons ago. A lot better last year, and that trend could continue in 2021. Tough spot here. The bye week helps, obviously. Extra week to prepare, heal up, rest your players, that kind of thing, but you got to travel there. Probably an underdog there. Come back home, play Arkansas. Arkansas, another team that's hungry and desperate for some big wins, right? They've been in the absolute gutter of the SEC for the last 4 or 5 years. Finally won some SEC games last year after going winless in the SEC for a couple of years. Sam Pittman trying to get something going there. We'll see. Tough spot for you after the Alabama game. You got to assume that'll be a tough physical game. You'll be a little beat up. You do get this game at home, so that helps against Arkansas. Final non-con game of the year comes after that when you host Louisiana Monroe, who, of course, last year was okay. I don't know what more really to say about it. This isn't a game LSU should ever lose. We've seen Louisiana Monroe beat teams from the SEC West before, though. Who, you might ask? Well, Nick Saban and Alabama, for one. Now, yes, I'm a Georgia fan, so go ahead, type 1980 or laugh, whatever you want. But my coach, Kirby Smart, never lost to a non-Power 5 team, so I don't know anything about Alabama losing to Louisiana Monroe. That seems pitiful and pathetic to an idiot like me. But again, Kirby Smart, undefeated against a non-Power 5. So Nick Saban's got to, there's nothing Nick Saban can do. Nick Saban could live to be 1,000 years old. He'll never be undefeated against non-Power 5 teams. Kirby Smart is. But this is an LSU video. Have to remind myself of that. Anyway, last game of the season. Now, this could be a great game here. Texas A&M, expectations are through the roof there. I like some of the pieces Texas A&M has, but man, Kellen Mond was there for 45 years as their starting quarterback. He's now gone. I know Jimbo Fisher's won a national title at Florida State, and I do think you got to give him some credit for that. You can't give all the credit to Jameis Winston or whatever. I mean, there's a reason there's only 4 or 5 coaches coaching in America that have ever won a national title, and that's because it's extremely hard to do, and you have to be a pretty good coach to do it. So I understand the expectations there coming off a one-loss season last year. The only loss was to Alabama. A lot of people thought Texas A&M deserved that 4th spot in the playoffs. They didn't get it. This could be a great game to end the season here. You have to travel. No, they come to you. They come to you. That's good. You avoid having to make that trip there and playing in front of all those cadets or whatever those people are that are dressing up in military. They're not in the military. I don't know. It's some type of stolen valor thing they have going on there. But those people are not in the military. They're just not. In the SEC championship game the following week, should you happen to make it there. So there you go. That's a look at LSU's 2021 schedule. As far as what jumps out to me, obviously, if you're trying to find a big non-con game, the only one you could even try to point to would be on the road at UCLA. Although I do think that's an interesting game because UCLA may be trying to put something together with Chip Kelly. This, honestly, is a game I expect LSU to win. The SEC has done extremely well against the Pac-12 over the last 10, 12, 15 years. I expect that trend to continue. I would be surprised at this point if LSU lost that game. But again, I'll do the predictions in June. What else stands out? No back-to-back road games. That's good. That helps. Tough stretches of games. How about Florida and then at Ole Miss? I mean, those are 2 pretty tough games in my opinion. I know Florida with the offense and Ole Miss sort of historically a bottom-rung team in the SEC West, but I do like the way Ole Miss is headed, and Lane Kiffin is a dangerous offensive coach. We saw it last year. He gave Alabama all they could handle, running up and down the field with them for 4 quarters before Alabama finally pulled away in the end there and won by a couple of scores. Those are 2 dangerous games in a row to me. That's probably the most difficult 2 games in a row that you have all season. I mean, at Mississippi State, and then you host Auburn. I don't know about that. Auburn, and then at Kentucky. No. So Florida, if you're looking for a tough 2-game stretch here where maybe you get tripped up, hosting Florida on the road at Ole Miss. Trap games, Arkansas, in my opinion. Let's say LSU is undefeated or maybe even just sitting on 1 loss heading into the Alabama game and it doesn't go well and you get the kind of all your hopes as far as winning the division or making the playoffs will be gone at that point. And then you got to host a hungry Arkansas team. Again, you're much better than Arkansas in my opinion. And that's not to bash Arkansas. I do like the direction they're headed, but you're a way more talented team than Arkansas. You should be a significant favorite there. But when you look at these schedules, you try to spot these potential trap games. And when I look at this schedule, the Arkansas game is the one that stands out to me if you're sort of demoralized after an Alabama loss, if that is indeed what ends up happening. Anyway, feel free to let me know in the comments down below what you think the Corn Dogs record might be in 2021. Again, I'll do a whole series of prediction videos starting in June and running through probably the beginning of August where I'll do 50 or 60 teams and I'll give you the exact record, including LSU, and I'll tell you who they're going to beat and who they're going to lose to. But if you want to try to take a guess now in the comments section, go right ahead. There's an entire playlist that I've created that's got all these teams in it that I've done so far with the schedule previews. I believe this is the 17th one that I've done, and I've got a bunch more coming throughout the month of May. Give this video a thumbs up if you don't mind. Share it somewhere too. That would be a huge help to me, whether it's Facebook or a group somewhere that you're in or Twitter or whatever the case. That would be a huge help. Hope you enjoyed the video. Good luck to the Corn Dogger. Have a good morning.